Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Hudson, and welcome all to My Life, My Music. Al, in this episode, we're going to be looking at tours, testimonials, friendlies, and any other business that you want to talk about. But before we get cracking on into the podcast, we often start with a photograph, and let's just indulge in Johnny Haynes and that wonderful photo of Johnny at Craven Cottage. And you were there with your pal the other night to see Chelsea win 2-0.
Yeah, I don't go to the cottage too often, boys. They're very. You put the thing on the photograph of when we were kids with the Chelsea Boys Club, which was a very special moment.
Yeah.
I was a little bit too young, but our Chelsea Boys Club was a good team. We have my brother who played for Chelsea in the youth team and went on to play at lower level. He was the one that played against Alan Hudson at Burton that time, and my dad recommended him to Fulham and fell on deaf ears, same as I fell on deaf ears at Fulham. But I've always been a special part of my upbringing, not so much now. Every time I walk past the ground, I think of Johnny Haynes. I knew Johnny Haynes very well. I was getting to know even better when he sadly had that car accident and, put the end to him. It was tragic. He was such a great man. He was in the mould of Bobby Moore, up there. Well, he could have went to any club in the world.
Yeah.
I think he's probably, when it comes in football terms, I've never seen nothing like him for loyalty. People like Bobby Charlton stayed in Manchester United, okay. But it's all right to stay at a big club. You're playing in big competitions every year. You're winning things. You're in the European Cup. And then they had Munich, and which was tragic and it's close to his heart, obviously. And Bobby stayed there, but John stayed at a very small club like Fulham, but still was one of the first on the team sheet for England for many years. And I've watched him play. The best I've ever seen him play is been on film because I was too young, really. And I wanted to go to Fulham and take his shirt from him. And I told him that, and that's how we become friends. And I once wrote a book about him, where Fulham going to get the next Johnny Haynes from. And he wrote back to me, he says, "You can't print this." He said, "Because Chelsea people will shoot you." I went, "John," I said, "Let me worry about the killing, I said, this is worthy of your art. It's a great book. And strangely enough, Paul, everything I wrote in the book has come to light. It's all come true because this was before the foreigners were coming over, the foreign players, and saving our game in many ways. But and the first player I mentioned, I said there would only been one replacement for Johnny Haynes in the kind of modern game then, who I come across, and that would have been Gunter Netzer.
Yeah.
If he'd have went to Fulham, and he would have graced the Fulham shirt. And the terrible thing about Fulham was, it's always been known as a comical club, because of Tommy Trinder and the London Palladium and all that. They had people say, "Oh yeah, they had George Best later on, who played there with Marsh and all that." I said, but George was finished. George went there for a laugh, and he lived around the corner, so why not? But no, Johnny Haynes was very, very special, mate. Very special to me. But and as I say, he came down. I come out of hospital, and my friend Tony Millard in Fulham now, he's got the Clarence pub. I use that often, and I'm a regular in there. And Tony had the bar in Ealing Studios, and he put on a big do for me when I come out of hospital, a money raiser. And it was a money raiser come, celebration for me getting through the coma and all that. And Johnny drove down. His mate Tommy Barnum, who owned the betting shops in Fulham, and was John's best friend, and he drove John down from Edinburgh. And John turned up the night as a surprise guest, and it was that was what the kind of man. He did it for nothing. He even put money in the kit, Not unlike today. I could tell you many players who would have wanted money to come down here, but I didn't even know he was coming in. It was just such a thrill. He was such a wonderful person. He was like, as I say, he was in the mould of Bobby Moore and that, one of the all-time greats.
And you did wear
Fabulous.
Johnny's shirt, his white shirt, but it was the white shirt of England, that number 10 shirt. But
Yeah.
he was famously called the Maestro, wasn't he, Johnny Haynes? One of the best passers of the ball that England have ever seen. And when you alluded to where will Fulham find another Johnny Haynes? I mean, where would England find another Johnny Haynes? He was in a league of his own, wasn't he, Johnny? Bless him.
Well, the comical thing about it all is, which we speak about a lot on our show, is he's like George Best. If George Best had been English, he wouldn't have got a game. And Johnny wouldn't have got a game in the modern game in England's shirt because he was too good a footballer.
Yeah.
They don't want inside forwards. They come. They're just no inside forwards anymore, are they? You've got the kids that are a little bit like them. Madison's looking good at the moment.
Yeah.
We had Jack. Foden at Manchester, but they're not really inside forwards. They're not playmakers. They don't make the team tick as such. Inside forwards probably the nearest thing to an inside forward is probably Modric.
Yeah.
That played at Spurs and has done fantastically well at Real Madrid, and David Silva maybe at Manchester City when he was there, a wonderful player. These kind of players. But no, there's no inside forward. We'll never see Johnny Haynes. But yeah, Gunter Netzer, I put him down, and then all of a sudden I said, well, if they get Gunter Netzer in, they're going to have to bring other players in and mention 3 or 4 or 5 different foreign players. And that's exactly what happened. It's unbelievable. It's almost as if they read my book.
It's a pity that the FA didn't read your book, Al. It's a pity that the people in suits didn't listen to you and take on board your suggestions on how to move the modern game forward. We did go back on one of the podcasts when you said about the 1953 demolition of England by Hungary at Wembley. They went back to the drawing boards, but unfortunately they couldn't draw, and that just about sums up English football. But let's go to your tours and testimonials. Your first game could have been against Greenock Morton. It wasn't a testimonial. Was it an Anglo-Scottish game, or was it a friendly game that Chelsea played at Greenock back in those days?
No, it was Intercity's first cup, I think.
Okay, yeah.
And I was sitting in the stand as a 15-year-old, I think. And I remember this team come out. It was a Wednesday night, and Greenock Morton, they come out in these fluorescent yellow shirts, as much as to say, we're going to make the most of this night. And Chelsea won 5-0, I think. And then it was up to Morton for the replay, and I didn't go originally, but I got the call up. Something must have happened. Someone got the flu or something, and they flew me up. And I've got a picture signing autographs, a young kid, and I think, where's that? And Dockett is in the picture, and Marvin Hinton and a couple of others. And I'm trying to work out where it was because I only looked at the baby, and it must have been in a training session in Greenock. But that was my first ever trip.
Well, if you get that photograph, we'll put it on your admin page and on your socials, Alan Hudson _10 on Twitter, or now it's called X. It's absolutely crackers. What was your first? Because the difference is, I'm guessing, with your pre-season friendly, you're trying to get your fitness to start the football season, on the front foot, get points on the board. The end of the season tour is almost like a holiday and a celebration of the season, if you like. Is that fair? No, with Terry Neal it wasn't as well, of course.
No, with Tony, what it was, don't worry, we had about 5 pre-seasons a season. No, exactly what you say. That's what it was. It was like a thank you for your hard work in the season.
Yeah.
And I was telling my good friend Kevin Condon yesterday. I was saying, the genius of. I showed him the program when I played against Liverpool. My England, my Stoke debut, and we were laughing at the price of the program, 8p, and what it was to get how much the entrance fee, and I was telling him about the trips. I tell him about that, the show I'm going to do this morning, and I said the genius of Waddington was he didn't just buy players to improve the team. He bought players with tools in mind,
Yeah.
and he knew if he had Gordon Banks, George Easton, and Jeff Hurst in his football club, he could sell the club to anyone around the world.
Yeah.
And that was how smart this fellow was, And when we had that 100 years of Stoke, and I went up and I fell out with the club once again because they were the focal point. Them three went on the field on their own, and the rest of us just walked round it and then joined them on the field. But the three 1966 players who were in the World Cup winning squad were on the field first, and that's how they sold that day.
Yeah.
So that was all Waddington. That weren't Stoke City. That was all Waddington, and Waddington did that. And Waddington, the testimonial was Stanley Matthews when he brought Puskas in and all that. That was all Waddington. Stoke City wouldn't had the first clue how to put on something like that. That was all the genius. That was all the upstairs work of Tony.
He was an absolute
Incredible.
genius, and this January, it's going to be 50 years, the anniversary of Alan Hudson joining Stoke City and really transforming that club to be one of the big hitters in the Football League, almost winning the league in 1974-75 season, Al. And sadly, had that roof not blown off, who knows what Stoke could have done under Waddington and bringing them players. Because let's just talk about that tour of Northern Cyprus. He signed Jeff Salmons, and did you tell me in a previous podcast he almost signed Francis Lee? God rest his soul, he's just recently passed away.
Anyone that walked into the Golden Sands Hotel bar, he would have pinned against the wall. And he said to me one day, I think we spoke about it. I've got it written down on my little notepad at Famagusta because of the war started when we were there. They thought we started it. It was we was by the swimming pool after about 3 days. We played the local team, Famagusta, and I think we might have played Chevy Yard. I can't remember. But the trip was that good, And Tony came up by the swimming pool, somewhere you never see him. He had his shirt hanging out his pants, and the same old Tony. He'd been up all night, and he'd been having a good time. And he said, "I need a favour off you, Al." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Will you come to watch Sheffield United play tonight with me?" So I went, "No." I said, "I can't." I said, "I'm going out." I said, "We're on tour, mate." So he went, "Al, do me a favour." He said, "Because what it is, I'm thinking of signing a player from Sheffield United, and I want your blessing. I want to see if you think you could play with this bloke." That's how thorough he was.
Yeah.
And the respect was immense, And I said, "I'll tell you what I'll do, Tony." I said, "I'll come for the first half, only if you come out with me for the night afterwards. We go down this club that we found." And he said, "You got a deal." So I went and watched Jeff Salmons play. And strangely enough, Jeff Salmons played this night in my position. And I said, "The way he's playing now, I know they're only playing Famagusta." I said, "But he'll end up taking my place the way he's playing here." He went, "No," he says, he's a left-sided, left. We need him down the left flank. And he had a wonderful left foot. I said, and he did. He was a great signing. And he said, "No, he's all down the left foot." And that night in the bar, in the hotel bar, Jeff Salmons was there, and he sorted his contract with him. And Jeff Salmons said, "It's all right, you're doing all this for me." He says, "But you got to get the blessing of the club first." He says, "I'm not going to say I want to come. I don't want to come." He said, "Jeff, I got some news for you." He said, "The club have already agreed to sell you." I've done the deal. I've done the deal. You're coming to us. He says, not only that, I got you a ready-made roommate. And I'm standing next to him, aren't I? And he went, you got him there? He wished he hadn't have done it now. But, and Sammy and I become like the Siamese twins in Stoke, and exactly what you just said, the following night, Franny Lee was in there. He was trying to, which would have been a great signing, with Jimmy Greenoff and Jeff Hurst up front. Jeff was still a good player, but Franny would have got a lot of goals for us.
And again,
he could. That's the fact. When we played Leeds, he could have smashed Norman Hunter again, couldn't he?
I mean, again, one of the game's characters, and City let him go. They thought that his shelf life had gone, but won the Football League Championship with Derby in '75. And again, had he have signed on that tour for you, may have won the championship for Stoke City in the '74-'75 season. Waddington was that close, wasn't he? Absolute genius of a man. And Sammy. Famously caught 4:30 in the lift by Don Revie, put pay to his England career, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He didn't listen to me and get in the cab outside. He said, I'll be along in a minute. So I went home. I went back to the hotel and I got stripped off, jumped in bed. Door went. 5 minutes later, he walked in. He said, "That's up my international career over before it's begun." I said, "Why? What have you done now?" He said, "I got in the lift with Don Reffy." And we had a 11 o'clock curfew on a Saturday night after we played that day. How ridiculous! And everybody was down. It was all down George Best Club that night and having a great night. And he only did it to see who would break the curfew. Alan Clark was standing in the corner, one of his players at Leeds, and I remember walking in and Alan Clark said, "He'll go mad, you lot out." So it's one rule for us and there's one rule for you. And it just shows you what they were like, Leeds, I just couldn't stand them. And our players, 3 or 4 Chelsea players signed for Leeds. I would rather have packed the game in and signed for Leeds.
Your first tour, Al, can you remember as a kid at Chelsea, you didn't go on to the Chelsea like Barbados, didn't they? I don't know what it was. You didn't go.
I missed the Barbados. I missed the Barbados. That was that Barbados tour. I think they went before I got in the first team. They did like Barbados. But I missed the Barbados. That's the one I wanted to go on when I refused to go on the under-23 trip.
Yeah.
Because of my ankle. And I said, I want to come. Told Dave, I blame the manager for me getting banned. He only had to explain to Alf that, he can't come because he's injured. And I said to Dave, I want to come away with the lads. I said, I've had a long, hard season. I said, I can't play. Well, the game, that's exactly how you started this conversation. It wasn't about going away and winning games. And, Dave was obsessed with football, and he didn't understand the word holiday, vacation, celebration, it was all that, and that happened. But I went on a couple of trips with the youth team. Were quite memorable. One to Germany, I think one was in Bremen, and the one where I went to Lucerne with them, and with Inter Milan and Partizan Belgrade and all that. It was very impressive, to see all the other kids in there. The one thing that caught my eye was the Inter Milan strip, and although it wasn't Doherty, it was he was a one for getting beautiful strips. Chelsea have always had that, and that was all down to Doherty. But my first real trip, strangely enough, was I had the injury in called the Osgood Slater's injury, and that was when I was 16 going on 17, and 17 on June the 21st was the day you're either going to sign your pro or they're not. My brother was there before me. They didn't sign him because he was one of the people on in the squad that went to Blackpool that got sent home. But my brother wasn't out with them, but he got tied with them, and he didn't sign him. And there was murders with my father. But then Docky says, Alan's not leaving here no matter what. He said he's signing here, and I was out with the injury. Then they give me the go ahead. I was out for about 8 months or something with the injury, and I couldn't run. I couldn't jog. I couldn't do nothing. I had a complete rest with my knee, and Docky got the sack. Dave Sexton came in, and it was only on the say of probably Frank Blunson and Tommy Harmer, my youth team coaches, and probably Dave knew a couple of the first team. They had seen me play as a kid, and they give me a kind of half a trial at Queens Park Rangers one night in a mud heap for Mike Keane, his testimonial, and QPR. I was half a QPR supporter at that time because I'd gone from Fulham to QPR because Rodney Marsh went there. He was the best player, and he signed me the following day, and 2 days later we was in Mozambique.
Right.
So that was where Eusebio was born, wasn't it?
Yes, he was. Mozambique, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first trip. That was my first trip with the senior team. So I was now full pro at 17, 21st of June. Obviously, don't take much working out, which I can't work out at the moment. 1951. Yeah. And I remember the sights in Mozambique, mate. What a dump. It was terrible. I think we stopped in Joburg for a couple of days or something, but Mozambique was the heat was horrendous. I remember Sexton really threw a wobbly at half time one game. He said, outrageous the way you lot, you carry on before matches is ridiculous. You got to prepare for matches. And we went, oh no, you're not prepared to play against Mozambique. We've had our preparation all season. They got it. They didn't understand what pre-season, what end of season tours were all right. Pre-season you can understand, that it's for getting fit and buckling down a bit, but not end of season tours. Any professional footballer would tell you that.
Absolutely. I've got down here, Al, 1969-70 season. There was nothing of note pre-season, but Chelsea went to Venezuela and Barbados. You played in Caracas and then played in Bridgetown. And the one game that you played in Caracas, you played against Santos and got beat 4-1. Have you any memories of that? Did you go on that trip? Did the boys coming back saying, blimey, we played? Because you played them twice, didn't you? You played them in Kingston in the February of 1971.
Well, I remember, February 70, wasn't it?
I've got down the 2nd of February 1971, 33,000 in Kingston. A lad named Douglas scored the winning goal in the 86th minute.
Yeah, I remember the game, although it went over my head because it was all about Pele.
Yeah.
That they'd all turned out for Pele. They even had him come on his own and all that, as they would. But I remember that game. I remember Caracas. I can't remember playing Santos. I don't know what kind of team they had. I didn't play. If I can remember Caracas, because I was trying to think of a song. I was on the beach. I was in the water messing about with Oscar. Was having a drink, and I was singing "Back in the USSR."
Okay.
I'm not sure. I think that I mean, the Beatles was my big thing then. Beatles. I was a Beatle. We spoke about all my love for music, and the Beatles, the Bee Gees, Air Supply, this, that, and Supertramp. But the Bee Gees around that time in the late '60s were what this country was all about. And they were just bringing albums and hits out like Fabulous the Standard, and like I say about footballers, football is all about, when people say to me, hey, he's a good player, he's a good player, he's a good player. I said, well, he might be a good player, there might be a talented player, but at the end of the day, football is all about, doesn't matter whether you're a kid in the youth team, doesn't matter if you play on a Sunday morning, doesn't matter if you play in a Southern League. Football is all about consistency.
Yep.
And if you could play as well as you can play week in, week out, this is why I loved Alan Ball.
Yeah.
Alan Ball was consistent. Great players are consistent. Frankie Lampard at Chelsea for all the time he was there. He was consistent. He didn't mess about. He scored them 20-odd goals every year in midfield. That's consistency. That's greatness, and consistency is everything, and in life in general.
Yeah.
Be consistent. Don't do one thing one day. Don't be a nice person for 3 days and a horrible person for 4 days. Be consistent. Be what you are. And footballers, I prided myself on that. And I think in 1972, my friend told me, after my injury as well, my friend Brian Madley of the Sunday People told me, he said, I broke the record of 10 out of 10s in a season.
Well?
Johnny Haynes held it, and I broke the record. I don't know if it's in the record books. I don't know. Sunday People will still go through it. And Brian Madley told me that. He says, you hold the record for the most 10 out of 10. They used to do them ratings in the Sunday People back then.
Yeah.
And that was quite something. But Johnny Haynes would get 10 out of 10 nearly every week because he played in a Fulham side where he was head and shoulders above everybody, But for me to get it, and especially after my injury, and I think it was the 71 or 72 season. Might have even been a season when I was fighting my way back after my ankle injury. But it was a hell of a feat if I did. I can remember getting 10 out of 10s quite a few times in certain matches, and I thought I should have got 11 to tell you the truth. But so that was great. That was something else that tells you about consistency. That's why I mentioned that.
Did you get any 10 out of 10s in the tour of El Salvador and Trinidad? Because Chelsea smashed Southampton 8-3 in El Salvador and smashed Southampton 6-2 in Trinidad. They must have been really pleased to go on that tour with you guys.
Well, I always relate to Jimmy Gabriel with that one because Jimmy Gabriel, my Seattle boss, was... by the way, Alan Hinton was 81 yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday, Alan.
Yeah. And I sent him my best wishes. I'll be sending him an email in a bit. Jimmy Gabriel was on that trip. I remember Jimmy Gabriel had this trick by the pool. He'd throw a bottle of Bacardi. He'd stand on the springboard at one end of the pool and throw a bottle of Bacardi into the other end of the pool and dive in after it and come up with the top off and drinking it. They were the A-Louse team, weren't they? And, but Ozzy coming from Windsor and ended up going there. He knew a few of the players, and we ended up we partnered. We all got a partner. A Chelsea player to Southampton. We all went out together and we had a drinking contest. And I don't know who won. It was impossible to say who won. But we said what we'll do tomorrow is it's got to be a draw. I'm afraid it's got to end up a draw. And we ended up coming in at half time, and Sexton went wild. He went, I know what's going on here. He said, people would pay good money. I don't think it was about £2 to get in, 10p to get in. So he's done it again. And he said, you go out there and put a show on. As we're walking out for the second half, we're going to the Southampton lads. The draw's off. Next thing you know, we scored about 3 goals in no time, and they're going, what are you doing? They said, we're trying to tell you. Delhi to Hollywood was going around smashing people. There was a riot on the field because they felt we'd gone back on our word. Because their manager knew what their team was like. He had the right idea. Go and enjoy yourself. So that was what I remember about El Salvador, yeah. So don't take no... I don't know if you could get a bet on end of season games at that time, but I wouldn't have bet on those games. 8-3 and 6-2, whatever it was.
I think if you'd seen you guys in the bar before the game, you wouldn't. All bets would be off. To be quite truthful, and you're absolutely right, Chris. It was a bit of fun, wasn't it?
And to listen to the rest of this podcast, head on over to www.patreon.com/SRB Media. Thank you.